I thought we were gonna get a longer cord too, but Amazon doesn't deliver. John?
Here we go. Ready? Mic on there, all that. Okay, first thing, we're gonna do Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Morning. All right, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Connolly?
Here.
Board Member Lucero?
Here.
Board Member Ritter?
Here.
Board Member Kimmelshoe?
Here.
Board Member Teeter?
Here.
Board Member Bush?
Here.
Board Member Casey Reynolds? Here. Board Member Calderon?
Here.
Board Member Chuck Reynolds? Hold on, Board Alternate Tryon? Here.
Okay, first up, consent agenda. Would any board member like to pull something from the consent agenda? No interest for that?
Move to adopt.
Any public comment on the consent agenda?
None.
Motion to approve by Supervisor Teeter,
Second.
Supervisor Kimmelshoe. Okay, I'm just gonna call, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Good work.
Number 7, approval of 2021 BCAG overall work program budget.
Morning. Members of the board, item number 7 is a request by staff to adopt our 2021-22 overall work program and budget. I last reviewed a draft with the board last month, which identifies all the specific work element projects we'll be undertaking during the next fiscal year. In total, we have 24 work elements, a lot of which include our required state, federal planning and programming, plus additional planning studies that we've deemed are necessary, and our administration operations for the transit service. There have been no changes with respect to work elements to what I showed you back in March. All staff has really done is kind of finalize our revenues and expenditures. So a link was provided in the memo to a full copy of the work program. I'm happy to address any questions or comments the board might have.
Any questions or comments by any board members? Is there any public comment on this matter?
None.
I'll entertain a motion.
I would move.
to approve the work program and budget for 2021-22.
Second.
Thirds, we got thirds, we're doing good, just take your, any discussion on this matter? All right, I'm just gonna call it oral because we're getting along so good today. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Oh, that passes unanimously, thank you. Number 8, approval of the 2021-22 Butte Regional Transit Service Plan and Budget. Andy?
Members of the board, I'm just gonna do this item from here. I had these hard copy printed out, but that particular one over in the office, so I'll just do it from here. This is the Beeline service plan and budget, which was also brought before the board last month. And there are no changes to this final service plan and budget. We are still at a total operating budget of just under 11 million and $10,830,000. Just to recap a couple of the items that we identified last time, being that a very good portion of that budget goes to our purchased services with TransDev. Page 3 of the item are all of the line item expenditures and revenues that we have identified. Overall, our budget is a little bit higher this time around, approximately 3% greater. Other than that, there are no changes to the draft plan that was presented in March. Take any particular questions if there are any.
Questions or comments by board members? Is there any public comment on this matter?
None.
In a motion?
Approve.
Have a motion
Second.
to approve.
Second.
Are you, Deborah?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Passes unanimously. I don't know. Do this to me. There we go. Next up is a public hearing for BCAG's federal funding under FTA. Sarah.
Good morning, Board. This public hearing is required by Caltrans for BCAG to submit an application under the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, otherwise known as CRSA, to construct the Paradise Transit Center located at Birch and Black Olive. BCAG has worked with the town the last few years on this project and is currently finalizing the design documents to be completed later this year. The transit center will be a critical link in the town's rebuilding process and enable Beeline to continue providing integrative public transit options to the Ridge. Staff is requesting the board open this for public comment and authorize the resolution to submit the application for CRSA funds.
Any questions or comments by board members? Is there any public comment on this matter?
None.
So I'll open the public hearing and I'll close it right now, or we're gonna have to continue it. How's this work?
No, you would, I believe, just close it today.
Okay, no public comment by email or phone. Okay, we'll close public comment. Entertain a motion to approve now.
Move to approve. This is Deborah.
Second here. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. Hey, you did that. Now we just flew through that. What?
Wait, Sarah?
Everybody's just doing great today. Sort up for items for information, project delivery services for Fire Victim Trust. Andy.
Members of the board, this is an information item being presented today largely for your information, further discussion. There is a fair amount of information and questions that we have as staff on this item. However, we did decide that it was necessary to bring it forward to the board. Prior to the presenting this item, we have had informal discussions with Supervisor Teeter, Board Member Jones, as this item affects their constituencies directly. On July 1st of last year, a Fire Victims Trust was established as an agreement to all victims affected by wildfires deemed impacted by failure of PG&E assets, and that is all victims of wildfire for those assets by PG&E all the way back to 2015, and for the entire state of California. It's a substantially large settlement in terms of the number of shares that are available as resources to the trust. I believe it was around 500 million shares has been identified as the resources that are available to victims of the fire, victims being classified as anyone who joined on to the civil or criminal suit that was put forth against PG&E. So that's kind of the backstory, is that there's this very large settlement and a trust has been established whereby a retired judge acts as the trustee for the trust. And then underneath the judge, there are a couple of judges and or attorneys that are identified as what's called special masters, and they are responsible for distributing these resources across the state to all fire victims. So how this impacts us is that we were approached by counsel representing the Fire Victims Trust, particularly on the behalf of the town of Paradise and all of the unincorporated area in Butte County, being that these are residents who were impacted by the fire that are on private roads. They are not within the jurisdictions of the Public Works Department or Public Rights of Way with either the town of Paradise or the county of Butte. That distinction for the resources being available to these private citizens means that the town of Paradise Public Works and or the county of Butte Public Works Departments, because they do not have ownership or public right-of-way of these roadways, they are specifically precluded from being able to act as the entities that would distribute these resources to the roadways. Hence, the search goes out for a nonprofit 501c3, an entity that is able to deliver these resources in the form of rebuilding these roads that does not have any jurisdiction or ownership of the roadways. BCAG was approached by council as being a possible entity that could provide those project delivery services, and we've had several discussions with the council, and quite honestly, we still don't understand all of the details affiliated with this. And as part of the agenda item, for us as an agency to be considered for this effort, there are several questions or topics that I particularly have. If an agency like ours is going to be considered as an entity to do capital project delivery on private roads, there are several things that we are very interested in having a good understanding of, and included in the agenda item is a summary report that I put together that identifies my understanding of an outline as to how something like this could even be accomplished. It does not appear that anything like this has ever been done in the state. One of my questions to the council that has contacted us is anyone else doing this? You know, we have this large trust that's established, but it does not, and I haven't got a confirmation on it, but it does not appear that anything like this has been done. So the additional scrutiny on that is we would be doing something that doesn't appear to have any example before it. So I developed a scope of work and some specific questions that I have that was forwarded to the council almost 2 weeks ago, a little over 10 days ago. I have not heard back from council yet on those particular questions, and one of the questions that I have as to how this could even work, I feel need to be answered for us to continue forward with even considering this as an option. So, like I said, we did communicate with Supervisor Teeter and Councilmember Jones about this, and just had some informal discussions about, you know, what we were seeing and received some input from them about what they see and kind of how they're seeing this as being a good thing or even a difficult thing for us as an agency. But more particularly, I wanted to make sure this council knew that I believe we have the ability to do this. I can't, you know, it's not anything we can do by ourselves, but I believe we could bring on a team of people that could do this. But it would require, you know, us looking at the agency and what we do and the ability for us to establish resources within ourselves. We're not very big to move this forward, knowing that it would be a pretty significant undertaking. So ultimately, it comes down to us doing what the board feels is something that's necessary. It's difficult for us, the staff, to say no to something like this. It seems like it's something that it needs to be done, and right now it does not appear that there are any good options as to how to do this through other agencies. However, I think it's imperative that if we're going to move forward with something like this, that the board is comfortable doing this before we as staff members can take this on.
I wish you'd called me, because I probably have more mileage that's not owned by the county than the town of Paradise, I would guess.
I believe that as well. And
next, yeah, there's some questions. I think it's really a worthy thing to do because I have continuous calls. They're more mad about the damage after the fire during the cleanup than they are.
Right.
Again, PG is responsible, but I guess the biggest question would be, could you build them back just to the standard they were before? That'd be really important to know, because if you have to come to current county standards, even though it's a private road, they couldn't have enough money, I'll tell you that right now. And then the next thing is, what percentage are they gonna give you for the cost and overhead, so BCAG isn't out of pocket?
Oh, exactly, yeah, I mean,
Those are the questions I have, but I really would like to do it. I'm
we
sorry,
would,
I stepped over you a little bit.
you know, I was just saying, if it
Nothing new
continues
there,
to
Bill.
move forward, we would certainly have to outline all the costs associated for us to do this, and we would have to hire consultants, as Andy said, teams of people to kind of, to do these projects, which aren't super complex, but, you know, there's a significant amount. I think just in Paradise alone, there are 65 miles of private roadways that serve about 500 driveways. The county, we don't have as much information, but again, there's been claims submitted for the town's private roads and then a claim submitted for the county's private roads. So at this point, Andy submitted a bunch of documents, some questions to these attorneys, and that attorney firm is Chico's Crawford, Chico's and Joseph. They're out of San Francisco and Santa Rosa. They're presenting that material to the trustee. It's retired Judge John Trotter. I think they're reviewing that to see about having a discussion with us. So we're trying to move that discussion with the trustee to get some clarification on things. Like, we would certainly want to be indemnified throughout the sole process. We would want possible some kind of CEQA exemption for all this types of work. So we've got a list of things that we would like to discuss with them. Again, we've got a pretty good track record over the last couple decades of building some big projects. This is certainly different from anything we've done, but we would, I think, do our due diligence to make sure we wouldn't be trying to take on something that we couldn't handle. And then, of course, we'd be bringing this back to the board to let you know let's move forward, and if it does move forward.
So I appreciate Bill wanting to go forward with this, but, you know, I have a big problem with the equitability of this. I contacted the lead lawyer of my suit. He has no knowledge of this. So where's the transparency with the trustee? You know, there's a limited bucket of money. Now the trustee seems to be in conversation of peeling off this limited bucket and going, this is more important. This is potentially going to get 100% funded. Someone may have lost their house with no insurance. They're going to get less money. They're not going to get fully reimbursed. We already know that as fact. And so, you know, I think that equitability has some serious concerns that I don't know if the trustee has been transparent with all the other attorneys and their plaintiffs in this. And so that's kind of number one. And then as Bill kind of touched on is, how do you know what standard to build at? And it's in your staff report. You know, is there a accepted standard? But some people are going to get a better benefit. Others are probably going to get a lesser benefit.
Right.
And there's another equitability issue. I think solely on that there's not a bucket big enough to pay for all the roads plus compensate all the other damages these folks have had. It's something we should probably avoid. I think it's just going to cause undue stress for this organization because it's so unclear. You know, the prevailing wage, CEQA exemption, those are all unknowns at this point. That's just going to drive costs. These are private roads. The local jurisdictions on people maintaining their private road, there's really no permit process to maintain your private road. And in your staff report, you know, you're saying, oh, we got to go to the local jurisdiction for authority. I question that they have authority on maintaining private roads. So there's another expense if they start deeming they have authority. There's the Board of Forestry issue.
Right.
I just think there's so many problems. I get what Councilwoman Jones is trying to do, but I just think an application is going to take money away from people that may need it for something more important, and I feel that's between them and their attorney. And that's probably my biggest issue with this is equitability. How about the people that chose to leave? Are they gonna wanna spend money on their road? You know, you need 100% buy-in probably to be able, or are you gonna skip that house? I mean, there's just so many questions that I think the best thing that I could suggest is to pen a letter back to the trustee, firstly going, have you talked to all the other attorneys representing plaintiffs with this scheme? And then going into your list of concerns and how is the trustee going to address that? That'd be my only suggestion. Otherwise, I think we should just not be involved because this is going to potentially be a negative to this fine organization.
I was just gonna say, Andy identified, and there is a fire victim trust fund webpage that has all their documents and all the information as to how the process is gonna work. And again, I can only speak to what we've found out is that the claim, a claim has been submitted to do these private roads, a claim has been submitted to do the roads in the county jurisdiction. Claims can be filed for by people that wanna get funds to rebuild their homes. They're all separate individual claims, and again, it's all kind of managed by that trustee and those special masters. So I feel a lot of the questions you raised are very legitimate, but I feel like we'd almost need to have someone from the law firm available to answer those questions and explain it.
I think you have very good points, and I didn't know that that was what this was about. I thought it was just a fund for roads. I didn't realize it was the whole bucket.
It's the total settlement. It was, my understanding is there was the 500 million shares of PG&E stock put in the fund. There was over $5 billion put into the fund. So based on day-to-day stock costs or share prices, that fund can range from 16 to $20 billion. So as far as the amount of the claim for the town, I think the estimate is that it might cost upwards of 75 to 100 million to redo the private roads in the town. Cost for the county, I don't think we have a handle on.
A lot of those people haven't even not sophisticated enough to know this is going on, and that's an equity thing too. I mean, I think we should keep an open mind about it, but I think Supervisor Teeter's got some good points, and we should explore it, make sure they're gonna take care of people that lost their entire house and stuff first. But I don't wanna throw it out. Do you, Lily?
No, I think on its face, there's some, thinking about what would be fair and equitable is the trustee does his job of going, hey, here's the bucket that we have. The stock aside, I mean, that's such a variable that who knows how you can count that and how long is it going to take for people to be reimbursed out from this trustee? I mean, it's going to be years and years. But, how do you fairly go, well, you're only going to get a percentage to fix your road? I could see maybe an organization works out, this is your percentage, and then holds that money until that community or that private road can get the additional funds it takes. To get 100%, I think is wrong. It's wrong to people that live on public roads, because that money was supposed to go to them equitably as well. And so that's where I think the conversation is. You can't expect to fund it 100%. How do you hold those funds to repair those roads? Because if you just gave it to each individual landowner, it's probably not going to get saved, or the low likelihood of it getting saved. A lot of those private roads don't have maintenance agreements. I mean, there's a problem in itself. They don't even have a document that they can go to court and go, hey, neighbor, you got to fix it because, or you got to partake in fixing it because we have this signed agreement. So all that needs to kind of get worked out before we can do this.
I totally agree, and those are all the questions and concerns that are being brought up are things that I'm considering as well. So I'm glad that you're bringing up those particular details, because you're right. Those are the kinds of details that I believe need to be identified, but at this stage in the game are farther down the road than us just even getting an understanding of the generalities of this. So I'm cautious, and I'm uncomfortable with this thing as it stands right now for these exact reasons. So
There's also, fair and equitable, what if they throw the money at something else? So, and we don't get the money for the roads and people don't get compensated. So I think we ought to keep an open mind and look into it. I like everything you've said. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. The other thought is, there's gonna be bridges and culverts, and do you terminate in their driveway or do you just terminate at the edge of their property? All these things would have to be considered and be very costly. Maybe we should call the roll and see each and every person if they have a comment on this matter.
Board Alternate Tryon?
Do you have any comment?
So a couple comments. I think this has been a really good discussion. I think I agree with a lot of what has been said. I did reach out because I'm filling in today, and forgive me, I'm still learning about BCAG. So, when I saw this agenda item, I reached out to both our mayor and our city manager. Neither of them knew that this was going to be on the BCAG agenda. So I think it's sort of important to understand that the city of Paradise is not taking a stance on this at all. This is a private lawsuit that was brought by individual persons. And, we did have some concerns about it coming out of the Fire Victims Fund. So money would be pulled from that to pay for private roads. Having said that, Jody Jones has been involved in this from the beginning. She is actually one of the people who headed the lawsuit. So I think my recommendation is that this waits until she is back and that she can address the issue. But it's my understanding in talking with both our mayor and our general manager that the town of Paradise is not going to be taking a stance in this. It does not involve the town of Paradise. So thank you.
Board Member Calderon?
Well, I'm kind of learning my way through here. I'm very new to this proceeding. I do feel that I should align myself with Ms. Stridon. I believe that she has the best in mind for the community of Paradise. At the same time, I also understand the issue that or the burden that this creates to the association. So I would align with Ms. Tryon.
Thank you.
Board Member Reynolds? No comment, Matt. Board Member Bush?
Yes, I'm sitting here and listened intently to the comments from the other board members. Great points have been brought up, but it kind of seems to me like, and believe me, my heart goes out for all of these people who have had a loss from whatever reason. It's a loss is a loss. But I wonder if we really want to, as a government agency, get involved in the restoration of private roadways because of the fire. There are far too many questions for me to be answered, for me to take a hard stand one way or the other. And I hope all that made some sense. Thank you.
Board Member Teeter?
I think I already spoke plenty on this matter, but thank you.
Board Member Kimmelshue?
Just one quick question, Andy. So if these monies are entrusted to BCAG, the final decision on how they will be used will be this board, is that correct?
No, the final decision as to how they be used comes from the trustee.
We will have these funds entrusted to us, and the trustee will tell us where to send the money.
We would essentially be the agents.
Okay. We would be basically contracting out to rebuild these roads, so we'd be like kind of the contractor they're hiring to do this.
Now,
So we're not making the decisions as to how the funds will be spent.
No,
Okay.
no, the only, and one of the items that I've even brought up with is just the simple mechanics of moving funds and resources from point A to point B. You know, if contractors are gonna do work, contractors have to be paid. Do the contractors get paid from the trust? Or does the trust deposit, the county works as our treasury. Do we create a budget line item and funds are deposited there and expended from there directly to contractors? We're talking tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in cash flow, at which if you've got several different contractors all working at the same time all over, we could be, we could have a cash flow of several $1 million per month, which we can't front. So those are just the mechanics of that I don't know yet.
That we would not be making the decisions. What I don't like is that we will, it's going to take at least one more staff person to handle this, as far as I'm concerned, and if not more.
Yeah.
And so if we do indeed decide to do this in the future, we need to make sure that it's worth BCAG's while.
Right.
To do this. And that's my opinion.
Totally agree. Any more comments? Because I do have a closing comment.
Board Member Ritter?
Yeah, I appreciate the comments from Supervisor Teeter regarding the equity piece. The other part that I feel like is a really important discussion is that when we're talking about private roads, and we've had these discussions, in relation to other issues, not specific to fire, it's not a county responsibility. And I'm wondering if we step in this role, kind of what sort of precedent we're setting. Where I think it would be appropriate is if those private roads are identified as part of evacuation routes, then it's a different discussion. But we've been having these conversations for the last couple of months up in Cohasset, because there's a lot of confusion regarding private roads and whose responsibility it is. And so I'm in agreement with Supervisor Teeter on this one, that I just, I don't think this is the way that we want to go right now.
Board Member Lucero?
I'm tending toward what Board Member Tryon said, that, this was brought up by Board Member Jones. I would be curious to hear what she had to say. But I also think that if the issue is finding a nonprofit to actually facilitate the funds, which is what it sounds like, we aren't going to be responsible for the decisions. We would be, and when I say we, the nonprofit would be responsible for contracting, whatever that means. It seems that there might be a better vehicle than BCAG, quite frankly. So I would be interested to hear what Board Member Jones has to say about it, but I tend to agree with all the comments that have been made here. It seems a little out of the wheelhouse for BCAG. But like Supervisor Connolly has said, I don't know that we close the door. I think there might be some other creative solutions that could be had.
Thank you.
Board Member Connolly?
I pretty much, I think we keep the door open, but every concern brought up is very valid. And I will say this one last thing. Cicero said something, maybe there is somebody else, but I don't know who that is. And I do know that I have people that have phoned me very distressed over the condition of the road, and they don't have the wherewithal to rebuild it, and it's not included in their insurance. And there was a whole lot of damage done by PG&E cleaning up, and the contractors cleaning up. So there's two sides to it. I really have an open heart to helping people that lost their whole house before we go out and try to fix their driveway. So this is it's not a simple one. I think everybody's comments are valid, but does anybody have any opposition to staff just staying aware and reporting back to us and letting us know where we're at? Is there any opposition to that? Do I hear any to that? So I think we'll leave it at that, and then we, again, like to hear from Councilmember Jones too. Are you good with that?
We just wanted you to be aware that these discussions are going on. And you know, as we said, we've talked with the supervisor and Board Member Jones, and she'll tell you that, you know, I'll let her speak for herself, but in our last discussion is that this decision is really going to be up to this trust to decide these things. And we're not certainly going to volunteer to do this without the boards saying this is okay to do, and we're not at that point yet. We're having these discussions, a lot of questions. Before we would even, you know, entertain this, those have to get addressed and answered, and that's going to be done coming back to the board. And I'd like to have the law firm speak to some of these things if they want to continue this discussion. So
it's fair to hear what Jody has to say.
All right.
Well, this is exactly what I was hoping for, and I really appreciate everyone's input on this. But I'd like to just, if we can, we'll kind of keep up on this, keep asking questions, and as the board raises questions, we'll keep asking them, and until we get to a point where it makes sense for us to say, you know, take action and say, yes, we are going to get involved, or no, this is not something that doesn't work for us. And I'll be bringing this back as long, and I told the representation of the council, I said, we will be taking this to our board as long as it takes for a comfort level to be gained or not.
I think the bottom line is, if the money is just going to get thrown away or something,
right,
with some of these things do, and this is a better option than that, then we'll be open to it. But otherwise, just keep us informed.
Okay.
Good enough?
Yeah, for me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We're going to go on to item number 11. It's informational. Post-camp fire study and transit and non-motorized plan final update.
Staff has been working over the last 2 years on the post-campfire study to analyze regional population, housing, employment, and traffic patterns for pre- and post-campfire periods. As MPO and RTPA, BCAG is responsible for developing long-term growth forecasts and maintaining a regional travel demand model for the region. And as a result of the fire, that information in those documents needed to be updated to reflect current conditions and inform future RTP and SCS updates. And as the item says, the study also updated BCAG's transit and non-motorized plan, which was last developed in 2015. BCAG had selected Fair and Peers to assist with the study, and Mike Wallace, our consultant project manager, is here today to provide an overview of the key findings. In fall of 2019, the team collected traffic counts, cellular device information, surveys, and feedback at multiple public outreach events. In 2020, population, housing, and employment forecasts were developed to inform the 2024 RTP and SCS, and were also reviewed by BCAG's Planning Directors Group and Transportation Advisory Committee. And in 2021, after multiple outreach events, BCAG updated the transit and non-motorized plan. In the packet, we included a link to our project website, which contains the final report and multiple appendices, which is postcampfirestudy.com. After the study is complete and after this meeting, that information will be hosted on BCAG's website. We were aware there were other studies analyzing the economic impacts of the fire, including 3 Corps' regional economic impact analysis, which was completed in January of this year. And after discussion with 3 Corps, we found that that report focuses on resuming and maintaining economic prosperity in wake of the fire in the Tri-County region, whereas the BCAG analysis updated our traffic demand model, informs future updates of the RTP and SCS, and updates the transit and unmotorized plan. So today we're looking forward to sharing our key findings and using this information in future documents and informing our routing optimization study, which has just started and is going to provide a detailed review and propose recommendations for the transit service. So I want to hand it over to Mike Wallace to provide a review of our key findings.
Thanks. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, it says I don't have permission to share. Do you have the presentation? Actually, maybe now I can. There we go. Okay, good. It looks like you can see the presentation now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for letting me present this work that we've been doing with you all over the past couple of years. We presented pieces of this to get in a lot of detail before. So this is kind of just a really high level overview. So like Sarah mentioned, the objectives of the study were to update the regional travel data, develop the population, housing, and employment forecasts, and then update this information so that it can be used for the 2024 RTP SCS, and then also update the transit and non-motorized plan. So it's a pretty broad scope, but I just wanted to be clear. A lot of the discussion you just had was very interesting, and that was actually not the study of this, the focus of this study. Identifying critical infrastructure, developing an evacuation recovery plan. Those were specifically not this scope. Is more the regional planning aspects, and then the transit operations. So not surprisingly, traffic patterns changed, and they changed geographically. Around the town of Paradise, the traffic volumes decreased. In Chico and others, they increased. Overall, passenger vehicles decreased by about 3% regionally, and then overall traffic volumes, and then the passenger vehicles about 11%. And then on the right-hand side, you can see as zoomed in, around the city of Chico, traffic volumes increased up to 11%, and not surprisingly, in Paradise and the other impacted areas, they decreased. This does include a little bit of traffic removing the debris, but we tried to exclude those. And then in the report, you can see the mixture of passenger vehicles and trucks, the details geographically. And we also looked at overall travel patterns. So looking at people who lived in the county and where they went before and after. So weekday trips entering Butte County increased by 14%, and weekend trips decreased by 9%. And the reason why we think this is that they had other options. They had left the county and they had other options for recreation outside the county, and also shopping and those types of things. And the counties that they went to were nearby counties. If they left, Tehama, Yuba, and Sutter were the primary counties that they left. And then a lot of the trips that stayed within the county, decreased by 9% on the weekdays, but 25% on the weekends, again, most likely due to that recreational travel. For those trips, so this is just a diagram of if they had lived in Paradise, where they went to, and most of them went to Chico, and then Oroville and Magalia, and then smaller amounts to the other cities and towns and unincorporated county within Butte County. So looking forward into the forecast and how the reconstruction and building permits and all these things play out, and then also just the overall regional plan, there's about a 1.1% reduction in total housing allocation. Part of that comes from the state, and part of it comes from local planning on reconstruction timing. But Chico does increase by about 5% compared to before, and Paradise decreases by 4%. In control total, mostly because they're having the time to reconstruct and reoccupy, those kinds of things. And then the other jurisdictions are roughly about the same. So the difference is just mostly Chico and Paradise. So as BCAG and Beeline support this new growth, the proposed near-term improvements are to stay within the existing operating resources and increase the level of service on some routes that have strong ridership. Examples are Route 8 and 9. And then also streamline the the route alignments to reduce the running time, improve the schedule adherence, and enhance the service reliability. And that will improve not only the service to the public, but also the ridership will either most likely stay the same or maybe even increase by running on time. That was one of the comments we got was it takes too long. So getting these routes realigned. And then the plan also will consider when to restore service to Paradise and Magalia, based on the residents reoccupying the area. Then the long-term plan is proposed to be implemented by 2045. It's increased capacity in Chico, partly because it already is an urban area, and also that it does get more of the housing allocation in the future, and then also expand into new areas. We also got a lot of comments about weekend service, so expanding the weekend service, not only the routes, but also service on Sunday expanding, and then also consider on-demand rideshare services that didn't exist in the past, whether that be partnering with transportation network companies or offering your own sorts of services that are more on demand. Then we also didn't want to forget the non-motorized component, primarily focused on access to transit and from transit. So focusing on improving walking and bicycling connections, to and from transit, and then prioritizing non-motorized improvements that were currently identified in the local plans. And again, within BCAG's jurisdiction, that it'd be partnering with the local agencies to implement those types of projects, since BCAG does not own or operate those non-motorized facilities. So the next steps are that the data and the information will be published, and BCAG will have all the data. So referencing that data and moving into the future, how it compares to COVID, how the ridership's recovering, how the building permits and things are evolving to modify the service plan. That's a great set of resources for that. And then also building off the recommendations of the transit and non-motorized plans. As Sarah mentioned, the route optimization study is currently underway, getting into a lot more detail and actually how to operate the system rather than this general planning that we had done in this study. So that's the end of the overview, and if we have time, I'm open to questions.
Questions or comments by board members?
This is Deborah. I just had a couple of questions. How much did this, if at all, take into consideration COVID?
So not at all in general. Obviously, the study was going on during COVID, so we did ask those kinds of questions. And if you look in some of the public outreach, we did ask, did you do this before, and do you anticipate doing it again after COVID to help with the transit plans, but not the forecast and those things, not specifically a COVID at all, more perception based.
Okay, and then which routes are 8 and 9?
I think I'll let Sarah answer that.
Those are the student routes that provide access with Chico State. So typically those are our higher performing routes when students are here. And so we were looking to expand that service just given the demand for it. And just to answer your first question, Deborah, since all the data was collected mostly in 2019, and COVID really was in 2020, we did have a lot of discussion with our riders and the people who attended our public outreach on COVID and just their perception on transit and kind of what that meant for our near and long-term plan. But that was the extent to what COVID was included in the study. It does mention it a few times in our report just because we were still doing the study in 2020, but I think with our Chico to Sacramento study that we're doing and the routing optimization study, those two do focus a little bit more on the impacts of COVID, specifically on transit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments by board members? Any public comment on this matter?
Thank you.
So, okay, this time, do we have any public comment?
No.
Does any board member want to speak on something not on the agenda? Okay, we're adjourned. See you right back here Thursday, May 27th. I show up on Tuesday. I'll be alone. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. Great meeting, everyone.